What's up, guys? So today I'm going to make a video on 5 reasons why lifting is the best physical endeavor that one can get into. If you've listened to the channel and you've seen the podcast, you know we talk about a wide array of topics, but one thing I do talk about is that there are going to be limitations and that there are going to be some hard realities as you get further and further into your lifting journey, but that should not dissuade anybody from lifting. So I'm going to get into these 5 reasons now why I think it is really, out of all of these sports and things that one can do, it is the best. So reason number 1 is that it gives very concrete goals. So I've mentioned before, I got into this very young, and a lot of people do get into this when they're in high school or sometimes even earlier, and it gives structure and goals, right? So it gives you something to shoot for with real numbers, right? So whether you're going for increased strength or increased measurements, or you're just using pictures, there are clear goals that you can set and see yourself get closer and closer to achieving. So a lot of positive emotion comes from incrementally getting closer towards a goal, not necessarily even reaching that goal, but striving towards something and attaining it, or the process of attaining it. With lifting, maybe you started with a 135-pound bench, or that was your first goal, was to hit a 135-pound bench. And that day when you hit it, it's very clear. Unlike with a lot of sports, maybe there's a specific skill you're trying to develop, but there is a huge component with other sports as to the skill of other people that you're competing against, as well as just factors outside of your control or things that are hard to measure, right? If you're trying to improve at tennis, you can obviously get better and better over time, but it's not as clear as if you've measured an inch bigger on your arms or you've added 50 pounds to a lift. And so for a lot of people, this is really important. A lot of people go throughout life with very few goals and without a lot of purpose. And there are certainly individuals where lifting really grounds them. And this is the one place in their life that it allows them to have this structure. Reason number 2 is that there are a ton of health benefits. Right? I mean, we all know that it increases bone mineral density, it increases muscle mass, it decreases risk of diabetes, it decreases risk of heart disease. There are so many benefits, including mental health, right? So I mean, a lot of people talk about these days the mental health crisis in America, but it has been shown numerous times that lifting and physical activity does benefit mental health. Right? This is something I wonder about myself. I got into lifting so early and I don't really have mental health issues. And I've often wondered, well, what if I never had this in my life? It's very hard to even imagine a life without lifting because it's just who I am at this point. But I think to myself, well, I'm doing this 5 days a week, right? Maybe even more at times, maybe less at times, but on average, most days I am being physically active. And I could imagine that one's mental health would get worse over time if they were inactive and sedentary and their body was over years and years past a certain point getting worse and worse. So I think the physical and mental health benefits are huge, and it is a big reason why people should be lifting weights. So reason number 3 that ties into that is that everybody should be doing it anyway. It doesn't necessarily add to the amount of time you have to take per week, right? Nobody would say that if you are already physically active, let's say 5 hours per week, that you really need to start playing basketball or you really need to go out and start playing soccer. Those might be great to do, those might be fun, but doctors aren't going to be telling you, hey, for your health, you really need to be playing this sport. Whereas at a minimum, even if your genetics for lifting are terrible, even if you have no chance of being successful on a bodybuilding stage, you should be lifting anyway, right? If you're 5 feet tall, maybe you think, okay, I'm not gonna make it in basketball, right? Or whatever your limitations for a given sport would be. But even if you have the worst genetics for lifting, for all of the health reasons, you should be doing it. And it doesn't need, if you just have some basic equipment in your house, then you can be lifting maybe 3 days a week for half an hour and still get a ton of benefits. So it's something that everybody should be doing regardless of their genetic predispositions towards certain activities. Reason number 4, which is a huge one, is that you can really improve longer than any other sport, right? Most sports, I mean, some like gymnastics, the peak is very, very young. Other ones that maybe are a little bit less power focused and less injurious, you can keep going into your 30s. Very, very few people can be a professional athlete into their 40s, right? We have some anomalies that exist, but very, very few. And most of the time, the decline starts well before that. Whereas with natural bodybuilding, there are people who actually literally are making improvements until they're 50 years old. Now, I've mentioned on the podcast before that there are some instances where they're maybe not necessarily improving, but they're still doing well and they're maintaining. And even that is great, right? Roger Federer, for example, is not going to be as good at 50 playing tennis compared to when he was 35. But we have a number of natural bodybuilders who truly do have just as impressive of a physique at 50 as they did in their early 30s, sometimes even more impressive. And that is very rare for a physical activity or a physical endeavor for somebody to be able to maintain peak levels that long. Even if you contrast this to something like powerlifting, it's very rare that people can keep going until 50, because this is actually my fifth point, which is that there's a higher injury risk. So now I'm not trying to say powerlifting specifically has a super high injury risk. Relative to other sports, powerlifting's injury risk is actually quite low. However, it is still going to be a higher risk compared to bodybuilding, or basically just lifting to gain as much muscle as possible. So if you look at rate of injuries per 1,000 hours, for example, soccer is often seen as the highest rate of injury. Other ones, obviously, football, MMA, basketball. I used to work at a gym where there was a basketball court and there were constantly injuries happening, people rolling ankles. A lot of other sports end up causing injuries. Now, it's not to say that you can lift for 30 plus years and never get an injury, but it has been shown that bodybuilding is the least injurious, right? I believe after that would be powerlifting, and then weightlifting and strongman, and then it gets into all the other quote unquote real sports. But the point being that you can really do this for a very long time, benefiting your mental health, benefiting your physical health, benefiting your physique and how you look and your confidence, without relegating yourself to being very injured for life. So that is a huge point. I know a lot of times people want to get into a certain activity, they maybe don't think it out too much. I know a handful of people who have gotten into sports that they maybe weren't prepared for later in life, and they had injuries that lasted for a very long time. Now, obviously, with lifting, you do see pec tears, you do see other injuries, but for the most part, most people can lift for maximum hypertrophy for a very long time. So that is it for the video, guys. Just wanted to go into the weekend with a positive message on why I think lifting is so great. If you've seen a lot of the podcast episodes, we do talk about some of the limitations, some of the negatives, some of the hard things that people are going to deal with after doing this for many, many years. But I don't want that to blind people to the fact that overall, this should really enhance your life. It is a really great thing for pretty much everybody to get into. And it's something that I think you should do. You should tell people to do. It should be a common thing that everybody is lifting. Whether or not you're ever going to step on stage is a totally different story. But I think it can enhance just about everybody's life. So if you like the video, comment down below and subscribe for more like this.